mean, Robert?
Okay, so we're doing now the cipher on the parsha, the shir on the parsha, and what I want to do today is a piece from the Vodas Yisrael from the Kozhnitzer Maggid. And I don't think we've ever actually done the Kozhnitzer Maggid before, just because the print that I have is an old print and it's hard to read. But this is a really nice piece. So just as a quick introduction to who this was and how he fits into the scheme of Chassidus, is he was around really from the time of the Baal Shem Tov. He was born during the Baal Shem Tov's lifetime. He was mostly a Talmud of the Rebbe Reb Meilich of Lezhensk. Basically, the story is that there was a whole story about his own birth, that the Baal Shem Tov gave his parents a bracha. They couldn't have a child for a long time. His father was like a binder for Spurim, and he didn't have so much money. And his name was Shabse, and he and his wife didn't have children for a long time. The Baal Shem Tov gave them a bracha, and the interesting thing was the Baal Shem Tov came to the bris, and he said to give the name Yisroel, which was the Baal Shem Tov's own name. So that's very unusual in the Ashkenazi world to give a name after a living person, but they followed the instructions, and the Kozhnitzer Maggid was born. His Hasidim often said that he was like a second Baal Shem Tov, and he shared the name. Basically, what happened was, as he grew up, he was involved with Chassidus, and his parents were Chassidish. He had a meeting with Reb Chaim Volozhiner, who was one of the biggest misnagdim. He was a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, and Reb Chaim Volozhiner was very impressed with the fact that Kozhnitzer Maggid, Rabbi Yisroel knew a lot of Gemura and a lot of halacha learning, as opposed to just knowing Chassidus, knowing Kabbalah. But eventually, what happened is he went to the Mezritcher Maggid, right, who was the Baal Shem Tov's main Talmud, and he wanted to learn by him. He said that as he prepared to learn with the Mezritcher Maggid, he learned 800 Sifrei Kabbalah. So in order to prepare for the meeting. So, right, that's a pretty big deal. Then he found when he came to the Maggid that he didn't actually know anything. Because in the sense you can learn a lot of Sifrei Kabbalah, but then there's the nimshal behind it, and that's what the Mezritcher Maggid showed him. Eventually, when the Mezritcher Maggid passed away, he was a Talmud of the Rebbe Reb Meilich of Lezhensk, and then eventually he had his own. He moved out and he had his own Chassidus. There's many stories associated with him and his Riach HaKodesh. We even have a goy. It was a Polish prince whose name was Yosef Antoni Poniatowski, who was a Polish prince, and he went to war. And before he went to war, he went to the Kozhnitzer Maggid for a bracha. The Kozhnitzer Maggid told him he was going to die in the war, and he shouldn't go. And he didn't listen, and he actually died. So anyway, we're talking here about a very deep Chassidish master. And what we're going to see here in this piece that we're going to do today is we're going to see that we know that there's in Kabbalah a very big emphasis on our part in the scheme of things. If you have to summarize it, Kabbalah would be very, there's two mahalchim, two approaches on how a person can look at himself. There's to look at himself in a lowly way, diminish his importance and look at him as insignificant, and Hashem as being all powerful and everything. That was very much stressed in the non-Kabbalistic text. The Kabbalistic texts from the Arizal on and even before continually stress the idea of our great importance and how everything that we do is of tremendous importance, and Hashem Kaviyuchel needs us and needs our mitzvahs and needs what we do. What the Kozhnitzer Maggid does over here, he says, yes, that's true, but then there's another way of looking at it, that everything is Hashem. So there is no us, and it's all Elikus. So then in that sense, Hashem is really doing everything. And he's going to sort of go back and forth between these two ideas and base it on this week's parsha. Okay, so let's see this. So this is the second piece in Avodas Yisrael in Parshas Vayetzei. And hopefully we'll have time to go through the whole thing. There's a little bit of a tangent in the middle, which I think we might skip just to be able to finish the whole thing on time. Anyway, so he starts the pusik, and really he's going to be explaining not just the first pusik in the parsha, even though that's what he starts off by quoting. He's going to be quoting that whole initial story of Yaakov going out from Beersheba on his way to Churan, right, to meet Lavan, and on the way, of course, he has the dream with the ladder, with the Maluchim going up and down the ladder. All of this is going to be tied into the idea that we're looking at over here. So let's see. So he says, "Vayetzei Yaakov in Beersheba." Yaakov went out of Beersheba. It says in the pusik, right? There's ner levar. So it seems that we can explain this. B'derech. Again, I have a bad print. So it's hard for me to see. I would expect it to say, yeah, derech remes. So so he says, I think we can explain this in a derech remes, meaning to look at something to the deeper sense underlying the text. Kimderech tzaddik. Bizman shiroyes atzmoi bitsuru. So first, you're going to start with something that we really dealt with last week also, but it's just going to be a side point. The derech is when a tzaddik sees himself suffering, oy begulis, or he sees the exile that the Eden are in, right? Aina mitzar al inni nafsho. He doesn't his tzar, his suffering isn't about his own pain and his own suffering that he's experiencing. Ki'im. What really is causing him suffering is that he knows that the neshamas of the Klal Yisrael are really limbs of the Shekhinah, parts of the Shekhinah, right? And so then, when a person is suffering, it's not just the person that's suffering; it's the Shekhinah that's suffering. Therefore, tzurich lismarmer. So then really what he has to really be upset about is not about his own suffering, but about the Shekhinah's suffering. Okay, so we dealt with that. We talked about that last week's shir, for those that were there. We mentioned this idea that in order to really connect to Hashem, we have to work on annulling the ego, right? And subduing the ego. But by davening for our own needs, then we just reinforce the ego. And so therefore we, by the very davening that's coming from a place of ego, we're causing a sort of a separation between us and Hashem, because to be connected to Hashem, you have to annul the ego. So it seems like the whole davening is sort of going against its own point. So then the avoid over there is for the person not to put aside his tsar or to invalidate his tsar. Right? His tsar is real, and he's justified for feeling tsar. But the idea is to remind himself that since he is only an aspect of the Shekhinah, so the Shekhinah is suffering, right? And he sort of transfers that suffering from himself upon the Shekhinah, and he's aware of the fact that the Shekhinah is suffering, and then when he davens, he's davening to alleviate the pain of the Shekhinah, and then the ego doesn't get in the way of the tefillah. That's basically what we learned about in last week's shir, and that's what he's alluding to over here. But he says, "V'chain Yaakov, so too Yaakov, k'shetzorech lebroyach mipnei Esav ochav." They had to run away from Esav, his brother, Beersheba ve'elech Haruna, and he had to leave Beersheba and go to Churan. And he says, "Perish, sheragio hilich Churan shemidas hadin chalila." And he explains based on the Zohar that there's really a deeper thing going on over here with the names of the places. Beersheba, literally the well of seven, right? That refers to the idea of the midas of holiness, which are in Atzilus. And then the Zohar says that Churan, which is an expression of anger, right? That word Churan is from Charoin, which means anger, is signifies the Klippa. So basically, Yaakov is going out from the realm of Kedusha and going into the realm of the Klippa, which is certainly not ideal. Of course, the way the Zohar explains it, he's going there to redeem the neshamas of Ruchel and Laya, who are neshamas of Kedusha, which are trapped in that klippa, and that is compared to the whole avoid of the Klal Yisrael going around the world and raising up nitzotzos of Kedusha from wherever they go, right? The reason why we're cast from place to place throughout the time of the Gulas is because we have sparks of Kedusha to elevate all over the place, right? We know the Lubavitcher Rebbe famously sent people all around the world and opened up Chabad houses all over the world. His intention, or part of his intention, that was that instead of Klal Yisrael having to be pushed off to Uganda or Thailand or these places, forcefully in order to redeem those Netzitzes. Let's just send people all over the place to redeem those Netzitzes all at once and hasten the coming of Mashiach, which his essential thing was the idea of hastening the coming of Mashiach, and the Mashiach can come right now. But so basically the idea is that Yaakov was going to a place of darkness, the place of Klippa, the place of extreme din, in order to redeem those Netzitzes from there. But this is for Yaakov a suffering. He's leaving Beersheva. He's leaving that place of safety, that place that represents Atzilus. He's leaving his, his father's house, which was a house of Kedusha, and it's all because Yosef is hunting after him and wants to kill him. So Yaakov was experiencing tsar, but really Be'em is that tsar that he was experiencing is a tsar of the Shechina, and that's why we're going to have these. He's going to explain to us now that these psikim over here and Yaakov's chulam and everything was understood in the Medrash to refer to the gulas or to the guliyos, all the exiles that the Klal Yisrael had to endure and had to suffer. So Yaakov's personal tsar is being sort of transfigured into the tsar of the entire Klal Yisrael and the tsar of the Shekhinah. So he says, Vikfar Ramzi Chazal, and Chazal already explained that this chulam that Yaakov had, this dream that Yaakov had on the way, right? Nirmiz loy called Dav Gulius. So Chazal explained that all of the 4 Gulius that Klal Yisrael had to endure, including this longest one, which we're in now, are all alluded to in this dream of Yaakov. And he says, again, it's really hard to read my print. This old print. The Chumash Abahem, and the most serious of them, the most serious of these 4 gulas in the Klal Yisrael had to endure, Hiachor ben Hazeh Ha'achra, is this final one that we're in now, right? Asher Ein Luni Gili Kites Yedia, because it doesn't seem to be ending. It seems to be just stretching on and on and on. So we know that really be'emes. Yeah, so someone just asked. So Bar Sheva would mean the Ba'ir of the spheres, right? Because Sheva refers to the 7 lower spheres of Atzilus. Yeah. Okay. So if you look at these guliyos, right? There's man, their time periods get longer and longer. Okay. So we have, right, the first Gulas Buvel was 70 years. Puras Hamuda, it's not exactly clear exactly how long that Gulas was. It was perhaps a little bit longer. It was essentially from the time that the Persians and the Medians took over Buvel until when Alexander conquered them, which I'm not sure exactly how long that would be. I think it'll be a few hundred years. Right? Then Gulas Yuvan was that entire time that the Yevunim, that the Greeks were persecuting the Klal Yisrael. It's not just the story of Hanukkah, which is famous to us because that's what we celebrate in the Yom Tov Hanukkah. It's actually a long and lengthy period of campaigns against the Yidden by different Antiochus, and not just one Antiochus. There's a whole bunch of them, and other Greek kings. You can see this if you read in Yosefin. There's a period of several hundred years, probably longer, a little bit longer than the Gulas Puras Amudai. And then the final Gulas, right, we're already in it for thousands of years. It's a Gulas that's much, much longer than anyone's ever expected it to be, right? So this Gulas is the worst in the sense that it's going on for so long, and we're wondering when it's going to end. You don't have any sort of any revelation. Like if we would know that it ends at a certain date, okay, then we would be hoping for that date. But now it's just like, we're supposed to expect every day Mashiach is going to come. So then if we expect every day Mashiach is going to come, so in a certain sense, part of us feels a certain disappointment every day. Okay, Mashiach didn't come again and again and again, right? So that adds to the challenge. That aspect of mystery, of not knowing when it's going to end, adds to how difficult it is. Okay, so he says, so he says it is known. Okay, Bais HaMikdash Harishan Keneged Avruam. So this is a Medrash. Medrash says there's going to be 3 Bais HaMikdashes, right? The first Bais HaMikdash is Keneged Avruam, and Bais Shani Keneged Yitzchak, and the second was a parallel to Yitzchak, And the third Bais Hamikdash, which is Bez Hashem, will be built, the Kurev, is Neged Yaakov. Okay, so the third one is going to be Neged Yaakov, and he says that Shleimedav one, that's the Yaakov is the perfection of the Ovis, and that is in a number of different contexts, because first of all, he's the perfection of the Ovis, because the Zohar explains to us that Avram is Midas HaChesed and Yitzchak is Midas HaGvira, and neither of those two can function on their own. They actually have to harmonize. There's too much, as we know, let's take the example of raising a child, right? Too much chesed, you give him everything he wants and you don't make any boundaries or any rules. He's going to grow up to be not ready, not prepared, not ready for the world. He's going to be, what's the word for it? He's going to feel entitled, right? There's going to be a lot of problems there. If you raise him with just gvira, just midas yitzchak, and all you do is punish him all the time, you never say anything good to him, you never don't compliment him, he's always just being punished and being criticized, and obviously that's not going to be good for the child either. So you have to have the balance of those two, and that's Yaakov. So Avram by himself is not perfection. Yitzchak by himself is not perfection. In Yaakov is a perfection of all of them. And then there's the other idea, which he quotes, which he says here in the next words, Imitusa Shleima, and his bed was perfect. Okay, which that signifies the idea, also brought down the Zohar, and the Rizal expounds on it, that since Avruam came from idolaters and he came from people who weren't of the Hashem, so he carries within himself some of that negative energy, and it had to be expelled. So Avram had Yitzchak and he had Ishmael. So Ishmael represented that negative aspect of Avram being sort of split off and set off to the side, right? Yitzchak was the one who continued the condition. And then and the reason why Yishmael, Chazal say that Yishmael are inclined towards niyaf, which means towards sexual issues, right, is because they come from Avroam, and Avroam's Midas HaChesed. So this is almost like the klippa coming off of Midas HaChesed, and so therefore the Chesed is misdirected, right? I think also Rabbi Goldstein says this also, that the Muslims, which come from Ishmael, they love Hashem. They love him a little bit too much, right? Because to love Hashem so much, they're willing to blow up a bus or murder innocents or whatever it might be, because that's how much you love him. It's a little bit out of bounds, right? It's not balanced, right? But it essentially comes out of that love of Hashem that they have. It's just unfortunately twisted because their whole thing is part of the klippa, right? And yeah, so someone chatted now that that's part of the zahama, right? That's probably like the impurity that's being sort of separated off from Avram. And then Yitzchak was already more pure, but he still had a little bit of that darkness, so to speak, within him. And so that branched off as Isaac. And Isaac, being the klippa that came out of Yitzchak, out of Gvira, was this murderous hunter, right, violent, threatening to kill Yaakov, all these murderous type of tendencies that we see in him, and then that we see in his descendants, right? Whether it's the Edomites, right, the descendants of Edom who were involved in helping Bavel destroy the Bais Hamikdash, or whether it's the Romans that came out of there who destroyed the second Bais Hamikdash and certainly terrorized the world to quite a big extent, right? That was the klippa that came out of Yitzchak. But Yaakov was already so Yaakov was done already, because when Yaakov came out, there wasn't more zahama to push off this side. There wasn't more impurity to push off. The truth is that's not 100% true, because we know that not all Yidden are perfect tzaddikim, and Yidden have their challenges and have their faults and have their Yetzer and have made mistakes and will make mistakes, right? So there still is a little bit impurity even within us, but in the larger perspective of things, Yaakov was metusa shlam, his bed was perfect. I mean, what Chazal mean to say, it's a euphemism to say that the bed meaning intimacy, right? That all the children that were born from him already were good. right? So we have all the 12 shvutim were good. There wasn't like a bad guy among the shvutim. Yes, it's true. The shvutim made mistakes because they're human beings. So they sold Yosef and other mistakes that they made, or even right, the whole story with the shivchas, right? And so on and so forth. Yes, of course the shvutim made mistakes, but they weren't evil in the sense you can't really say that Shmuel or Isaac were evil either. I'm sure they had their redeeming qualities too, because everything is a mix, right? But we're talking about like in a general sense. The Shvutim in a general sense were all tzaddikim. So that means that the first Bais Hamikdash, which is Kneged Avruam, so that wasn't complete balance and complete perfection. There's two reasons that we mentioned. First, that Chesed by itself is not balanced, and second, that there was still klipa, quote unquote, within Avram, right? So the first Bais Hamikdash was able to be destroyed. And then the second Bais Hamikdash was going to get Yitzchak, and there still was an issue there. The second Bais Hamikdash was also able to be destroyed. But the third one, which is Kneged Yaakov, which is Kneged this perfection that Yaakov represents, right? Then the third Bais Hamikdash will stand forever. That's basically what he's going to say. So he says, so Yaakov was perfect. V'lo yeh boy, v'lo yeh loy harisas. The third Bais Hamikdash will not have a destruction. It will be forever, right? It says Ve'isa loy kavro. Okay, so then the same medrash that says first Bais Hamikdash is Avram, second is Yitzchak, and third is Yaakov, also assigns different names for the Bais Hamikdash. Which are connected each of these three Butei Mikdash. And we actually did this, if anyone remembers, we did a meditation once that we started visualize ourselves going through these three Bais Mikdashes. Basically, Avram called the Bais Mikdash a har, a mountain, and Yitzchak called it a sude, a field, and Yaakov called it a bayis, called it a house. Okay, so we're going to see what that has to do with anything. But so basically, but okay, we'll see where he's going with this. But he quotes this part of the Medrash also. So someone asked, where is Yosef in all of this? So Yosef is not featured in this cheshbon over here. I mean, just thinking how he could fit in. The third Bais Hamikdash is going to be connected all of the shvutim, right? Because it represents Yaakov. So then we have that we're told in Yechezkel, when Yechezkel describes the vision of the third Bais Hamikdash, he describes it as having 12 gates connected to 12 shvutim, right? So all the shvutim are sort of involved. So Yosef is involved in a certain sense as well, but he's not directly involved. Here we're just dealing with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, so let's see. So he says, and he says, and it says over there in that medrash, Loik Avram shekuroi har. Avram called the Bais Mikdash a mountain. Yitzchak kuroi suda, and Yitzchak called it a field. And Yaakov shekuroi bayis, and Yaakov called it a house. Okay, v'zei romas bepusik zay, and he says, and this is sort of alluded to in the pusik over here in our story of Yaakov, right, where it says V'yikatz Yaakov mishnusay v'yira, and so it says that Yaakov woke up from his sleep and he was afraid, right? So he had a dream that troubled him, and he says Dahaini kishahavinoi la'oirech hachorben ha'achron nofel ulav hayira v'pacha limer musa yeh hakayis. So if we understand that Chazal tells us that this dream of Yaakov represented the history of the Klal Yisrael and the Guliyos, so he saw that Avram's Gulis, the first, Avram Yitzchak's Gulis, the Gulis which is Kneged them, which is, in other words, the Gulis of after the first, the Chorban, from the first Bais Hamikdash to the second Bais Hamikdash. Okay, so those were pretty scary, but he saw that his Bais Hamikdash, the third one, is going to be such a long time until it's built, and the Gula is going to be so long. He got very scared, and he said to himself, "When is the end going to be? When is this whole thing going to end?" But he said, "Vayomer," but Yaakov said, "Ein zekiim bais Elokim." But he said, "No, this is the house of Hashem." Right? This is what it says in the pusik. When he woke up from his dream, he said, "This is the house of Hashem." So in other words, he after experiencing the fear, he then sort of consoled himself by telling himself, "This is the Bais Elikim." Koloimer, this means to say, Shes Nachem, he sort of comforted himself. Shemestoma Chorban Hazeh, right? Kniel Bais Hamikdash Shnikra Bais Dira Kavia Loilumim. He said, "This is the Bais Elikim, this is the house of Hashem. The third Bais Hamikdash, yes, the Gul is going to be long and it's going to be hard. But after that Gulas, we're going to have the third Bais Hamikdash, which is Bais Elikim, which is the house of Hashem, which is going to be a house that lasts forever." So with that, he comforted himself. But if he erich or hageila, kein erich chorben, because the way it works is that the more powerful the ore that has to come down, the more difficult will be the time preceding it, right? So in other words, the very reason why this last Gulas is taking us such a long time and we're having so much suffering in this last Gulas is because we're preparing for a very, very big ore. And we know that this is something that the Rizal tells us, and we find this all the time, this idea that that the greatest darkness is before the greatest ore. The Rizal mentions this in connection to Pirim, in Shar Kavunis, and also in different places that you have this idea. It's like basically the idea is that usually the idea of a very powerful ore means, just in Kabbalistic language, that Za and Nik of Atzilus are punim bepunim. They're face to face. When they're face to face, then they're able to be mizavik, and the tremendous ore comes down. But in order for them to actually turn face to face, there's something that has to happen that's called the Nesira. The Nesira means that when they're back to back, which is not such a good state, that's like the Gula state, right? When they're back to back, first of all, that's tam not good because there's not that much ore coming down. But then what happens is there's the Nesira, which means the splitting off in order for them to be able to turn around. And that splitting off is going to involve Zah going to sleep. Okay? And this is based on what we have by Udam and Chava, because Udam and Chava is exactly the same thing. Udam and Chava originally created back to back, as the Gemara tells us, and then Hashem put Udam to sleep and then split Chava off. So there has to be the sleep period that happens before it. There's a technical reason for it, because basically the idea is, and for those that learn more Kabbalah, you'll understand. If for those that don't, you'll understand, but don't worry about it. It's just a little detail. The basically what has to happen is, in order for them to split off, Zah is feeding Chasudim into Nik, and she's dependent on him. For them to split off, those Chasudim have to go out of Zah and come into Nik directly. So what happens is that the Moichin go out of Zah. His mind, so to speak, goes out, which is what sleep means, right? And then that allows Nik to become separate and be able to, and then they're able to turn face to face once Zah gets back as Moichin and Kavyuchel wakes back up. So the back-to-back situation itself is very difficult, but the splitting and Zah going to sleep is even more difficult, because Zah is Kavyuchel, the vehicle through which Hashem, the Ein Sof, is Mashgiach, through which His providence comes down to us. So when Zah Kavyuchel is asleep, it's like Hashem's asleep, Kavyuchel, Chas v'shulam, right? But we have this by Human and Achashvarish, that Human told Achashvarish, right? Yashna Am, right? There is a nation which Chazal Darshan, that he said, Elikai Yisrael Yushan, their God is sleeping now. Now's the time to get them, because their God is sleeping. What does it mean that Hashem is sleeping? That means that Zah is in the situation where he's deactivated, so to speak, while the splitting is happening. So then that's like the biggest darkness and the scariest time. And so the idea is that the greater the order is going to come in, the greater the punim is going to be, is the greater the darkness is going to be immediately preceding that, right? So because of that, Yaakov saw that since the Gula is going to be so long, then it must be that which is going to come down afterwards is going to be the most powerful Bais Mikdash that ever was. And that's why at first it says he woke up and he was afraid, and then he said, no, okay, I don't have to be so afraid. Because the reason why the Gula is going to be so difficult is because it's Baisa Likim. Because what's going to come down afterwards, the Baisa Shlishi, my Baisa Mikdash, Yaakov's thinking, right? That one is going to be a Baisa Likim. That's going to be an eternal. So that was like his comfort. And he says the fi erich or okay. Says v'lechain nimshich hachorban hazeh zman rav ein kites. And that's why this last gulas is taking such a long time. Lahoirus, in order to show us can geila sida that the gila is going to be after the gila is going to come after the chorban. Tia the behiris ein soiva ein kites. It will be an ord that's coming down that's infinite and endless. It's going to be a tremendously amazing time. It's going to be way more than the time of the first Bais Mikdash, second Bais Mikdash, right? In the first, Chazal tells that during the times of Bais Mikdash, there was a tremendous hashpur that was coming down. The fruits were giant, right? They say that even in times of the second Bais Mikdash, where Klaisel wasn't so behaved a lot of the time, right? But under what's her name, under Shlom Tzion, there was a certain king, Yanai, who was a tzedek, he was a bad king, and he murdered Talmid Chachamim. When he died, his wife took over because the children were still small. And during that time that she ruled, it was a very good time for Kal Yisrael. So then Chazal say that those times the wheat was like giant, and the plants were, the fruits were huge. So there was already something a little bit supernatural happening at the time. In addition to the fact that Chazal tell us, first we have the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in the 6th Parak that tells us that there were certain miracles happening in the Beis Hamikdash itself, right? So nature was, so to speak, sort of different at the time when the Beis Hamikdash was standing. But none of that compares to what's going to happen by the Beis Shlishi. By Beis Shlishi, it's going to be, the whole world is going to be turned into something entirely different. You won't recognize it almost, right? The order that's going to come down is going to be so powerful, and humanity is going to get to such a higher level of awareness of Hashem, such a higher level of connection, that literally, the world is going to be totally different. We're going to have to rewrite all the books, literally all the science books and all the whatever else, right? Once we get this level of awareness, that's going to happen when the third Beis Hamikdash is going to be. Okay, so that's sort of like our comfort when we're going through this very long gulas. So he says, and this is what the Pusik says, Hinai malachai elokim oilim v'yordim boy. So let's go now to the details of the dream. In the dream, he dreamt and he saw Malachim going up and down the ladder. V'adiktek mevir, aliyah shekoidim yirida. And the kasha that all the Mefarshim ask on this, that the Malachim are, the Pusik says, the Malachim are going up and going down. L'choira, you would think it should be the other way around. Where are the Malachim coming from? They're coming from Shemayim. They should be coming down first and then going up. That's a question. If you look at all the Mefarshim there, the Mefarshim al Pi Pshat have all different kinds of approaches. Rashi has in his first approach, he has an approach that the Malachim from Eretz Yisrael going up and so on and so forth. But what he's going to focus on is the second Pshat in Rashi. And he says like this. And he says, Perish Rashi, and he says Rashi explains via Shloimer Oit, we can say another way, right? Dinai Kasher B'nai Yisrael Shriim Al Dmusam Oisarutzim Koinam. The second way, Rashi wants to explain that these are the Malachim of Kal Yisrael, and the Kal Yisrael are living in their land and doing the will of Hashem. Al Yudam Misnahag Merkova Al Yoina, and then when the Yidden do the Rutz Hashem, then they rule over and they conduct all the higher worlds. And all the worlds receive their hashpur, receive their or. Everything happens through the Klal Yisrael. So in other words, basically the idea is that in Rashi's second approach, the way the Kozhnitzer and Maggid is understanding it, he's twisting it in a little bit of the different direction of what Rashi is saying. He's saying the idea of these Malachim are really, Klal Yisrael is conducting this whole system. The Malachim are originating from Klal Yisrael and from the mitzvahs that we're doing. The Malachim are symbolic of the Nitzoitzes that we're sending up, right? So they're going up, and then there's a Shefa coming down, and that's what the ladder represents. So in essence, basically what we see over here is a tremendous, tremendous importance of the Klal Yisrael, and how what we do rules the entire world and controls how the world is conducted. So our actions are tremendously important, because the whole point why this physical world exists at all is because there was a Shviras Hakailim, and there's Nitzoitzes down here, and the Nitzoitzes have to be brought back up. Of course, what he's going to point out now is, but really the whole thing's arbitrary. In other words, on the one hand, we can say, yes, we're so important because we have this role to play over here. The Rizal expands on this so much. The Rizal says, quotes from different psikim, Tni oiz lelikim, give strength to Hashem. We give strength, kavyuchel, not to the Ein Sof, because the Ein Sof is not in need of anything, but we give strength to this system, into Atzilus, and we rectify it through what we do, right? Right? He rides the heavens with our help. The Rizal explains. It means not that he's riding the heavens to help us, which is one way you could read the Pusik. It means that he rides the heavens with our help. We cause these chariots and these vehicles in Shemaim to move, right? So in essence, they're right. The very fact that they're moving is through us and through what we're doing. So in a certain sense, we're extremely, extremely important. That's this idea of the Meluchim going up and down the ladder. But then what the Parshas Maggid is going to do, it is going to sort of throw a wrench into all of this. I guess maybe just that we should have the whole picture. But really, 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 be'emes, the whole thing is arbitrary. Because the Ein Sof didn't have to make a world like this. And the Ein Sof didn't have to make that there was an Atzilus with the Shviras Hakailim, and that there's a tikkun to be done, right? So ultimately, even though we are helping the system that the Ein Sof created, but the Ein Sof created it in order for us to have something to do. In other words, what really, it's like a father has a little boy, and he wants him to be entertained, so he buys him like a nice toy with a lot of nice flashing lights, and he's pressing the lights and they're flashing. In a certain sense, the boy thinks, wow, I'm doing such a good job, I'm lighting up all the lights, right? And that's even if it's like involves some sort of a mathematical thing or matching or something that if you get it right, then you get the prize. It says that something lights up and tells you, wow, you're so good, or whatever it is. So the boy thinks he's accomplishing great things, right? But ultimately, the father just gave it to him to give him something to do, right? He's not in the grand picture of things. It's not. It's really the father that loves his son so much that he gave him this avodah, right? So in that sort of a sense, Hashem created this whole system in such a way that there should be a Shviras Hakailim, and that there should be klippas, and there should be nitzoitzes, and so in order that we down here should be able to have a way to connect to Him, right? So it's really for our benefit, and we shouldn't think of ourselves as that we're so amazing that we're doing all these tremendous tikkunim. Yes, we should. On the one hand, on the other hand, we should know. But the whole reason why Hashem set up the system this way is just because He wanted that we should have a purpose. Because it would almost be an injury to create entities that don't have a purpose. Imagine if there was nothing to do, if the world was perfect, and all we would just be doing is just relaxing and having fun. It sounds good, maybe, right? But it wouldn't be fun for so long, right? Because any entity, right? Any conscious entity, part of its essence is that it wants to accomplish, and it wants to do, and it wants to feel like it's accomplishing something, and that it's doing something important, right? So Hashem wouldn't create us just for us to just be here, right? So the whole thing is really for our benefit, right, and not for Hashem's benefit. So it's both, right? Depends how you look at it, right? So yeah, or someone's chatter, or worse yet, a broken world in which there's nothing for us to do, right? Yeah. So basically, it depends how you look at it, right? So that's sort of what he's going to clarify over here. He says like this. So I'll just find the place. Okay. So he says, right, so the whole thing is conducted through the Klal Yisrael, and the Klal Yisrael are causing this whole system of the ups and downs of the Malucha, right? The truth is that there's even deeper than this, and I mean, he doesn't bring it down over here, but some of the Chassidus Furim say that when it says Yaakov had a dream, and there was a ladder, and then it says, Malucham oilim v'yardim boy, Maluchim are going up and down, boy, right? So the word boy could mean on it, because the word silam is masculine. So the word boy really means on him, right? But usually you understand it first to the ladder. But it could also mean on Yaakov. And the Chassidus say, Maluchim oilim v'yardim boy. It's through Yaakov, it's through the Yid, it's through the Yid and his avoida that this whole system is happening, right? So there's that side. Okay, so all right. Okay, so someone just chatted on something that we can't go into now because we don't have enough time. Because it goes into the whole idea, because he's asking about the idea that it says that we were created against our will, and that we're here against our will. So then, how does it interact with the idea of the whole thing being for a benefit? And this is a whole discussion, okay? Because there is a pshat in that, but since we're like holding out the last 10 minutes, I want to finish at least the main ideas that he brings over here. So we can't get into it now, okay? But I'll speak to you about it later. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna start summarizing, I think, because we're getting close. We're like, it always happens this way, that like we have to sort of rush a little bit to finish the piece. But anyway, so basically he says that so there's this idea that everything's happening through the Klal Yisrael, and and when we are doing the roots in Hashem, then Shav is coming down in a good way, and things are good in the world. But when we don't, then it comes out in the opposite. And then he mentions that basically the way that manifests is it manifests that the Shav is coming down essentially to the nations and not to us. Because the reason is because the nations, their role is to take care of the physical aspects of the world, of the chitzonius aspects of the world. Our mitzvah is to take care of the nitzoitzes, which are the pneumius of the world, right? So when Shefa is coming down, the Shefa is going to come down to whichever level is calling to it more. So when the Klal Yisrael doing the roots in Hashem, then the Shefa comes down to the Klal Yisrael, and the Klal Yisrael have the Shefa. And of course, it also flows over to the nations who are taking care of the physical world. But if the Klal Yisrael aren't doing the roots in Hashem, then the way that when that Shefa comes down, it's going to come down to those who are doing their part, and the Goyim are taking care of the physical world, right? They're making medicines, and they're building civilization, and they're hopefully trying to make peace with each other, and so on and so forth. They're trying to take care of the environment, right? They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the Shefa comes down over there, and we only get the leftovers, so to speak. That's what happens when we don't do our part, and we don't do what we're supposed to do. And so he quotes this Mamar Chazal. Chazal say Yisrael shebechitz l'uretz ovdei avodas kachuvim mezulas b'taharahem. Chazal have some of these statements. I think some of these statements, the intention was to shock, right? Chazal, it's famous. It's not just in Chazal. It's in Babylonian culture from that time. There was this idea of hyperbole. Hyperbole means like exaggerating a point or saying it in a very shocking way to sort of boom, to get it across. So you find sometimes in Chazal where they say these things are like, whoa, right? So one of these statements in Chazal, in the Gemara, Chazal say that the Yidden that are Lechitz to Uras, the Yidden that are outside of Eretz Yisrael, are of the Avodah Zura. They're idol worshippers b'tahara. They're idol worshippers in purity, in the sense that don't think they're actually idol worshippers. It's b'tahara, but it's like idol worship. And so that in that over there it implies that people should live in Eretz Yisrael, right? But then, as usual in Chazal, which is so confusing, sometimes you have Mamori Chazal that say the exact opposite, like the Mamori Chazal that say that the yeshivas in Bavel are so much better than yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. So it's like whatever. In Chazal, it's very confusing to get to get one systematic derech. One of the reasons was because so many different people were making the Gemara, and they were all different people with different opinions, right? The Gemara is not just one person's opinion, right? It's many different ones. So because of that, it's almost sometimes hard to figure out what should I go with. Should I live in Eretz Yisrael, like this Gemara is telling me, or should I live in Chitzlur, or in Bavel, like the other Gemara? It's very confusing, right? But so someone asked just on the previous point. So in our times when technology and medicine and so on has advanced exponentially, how do you look at that as the overflow from us or the other way? So it seems like the shefa is coming down mainly the other way, right? It seems like again, Klal Yisrael nowadays. I think it's getting a little bit better nowadays that with the internet and with so on and so forth, Yiddishkeit is no longer to the goyim some strange, creepy thing that's somewhere in the shtetl where they have these secret meetings of 10 people in a shul where they chant mysterious words. It's no longer so creepy to them anymore because there's so much more available, and they can read more about it on Wikipedia. They can on YouTube they can find a shir from a room, and they can so things are getting a little bit better in that sense, but still we're not looked at by the world at large as a particularly respectable and amazing spiritual community, right? If someone's looking for spirituality, then go to the Buddhists, right? Or to the New Age, right? The Yidden would be like choice numbers 5 or 6, right? So we see that the Shev is coming down mainly to them still at this point, but I think it's getting better. And I think the reason why it's getting better is because Yidden are also awakening spiritually. And the more that we awaken spiritually, and the more that we work on ourselves spiritually, and I think learning Pnimis Torah also has a very big part of this, right? So things are changing in a positive direction, I think. Okay, but anyway, right? So the idea is that we have this statement of Chazal of the Klal Yisrael in Gulis being like of the Avodah Zorah, and he explains that what it means is this thing that we're talking about. We're not actually of the Avodah Zorah, right? But of the Avodah Zorah, the people around us, the secular nation around us is getting the shefa, and we're getting it that the leftover shefa, the overflow from them. So it's sort of like in a certain sense we have shaykhs to them and to their Avodah Zorah, and in a certain sense we're dependent on them, right? We're dependent on the government to have police officers to keep us safe and to give us the child benefits and so on and so whatever governments do, right? So in a certain sense we are actually dependent on them, right? And that's the Gulas type of a situation. So then he goes into a little bit more, and he goes into this idea that when Yaakov awakened from the Chulam, right? So then, second. So then it says V'yifga b'mukam. Actually, I think this is right before the Chulam. It says V'yifga b'mukam. He reached the place, the mukam. And once the Kozhnitzer gets into this idea of the mukam, he goes into the idea of Hashem being called Mukay, right? Because we know that we have consistently through Chazal, one of the names or the kaniyim, not the names but the words used to reference to Hashem is Hamukay, right? Like we say, what's it called in we should never know, by Shiva, right? Hamukay Minachem, right? And different places in the Haggadah we also have it, right? We have Hamukah, and there's a bunch of different places where that is. Hamukah means the place, right? So he brings famously the idea where the Gemara says, he quotes this from the Medrash. It says, "Mipnaima mechanin shmoi shel Kadosh Baruch Hu v'kar moisem mukam." Why is it that we call Hashem Mukah, which means the place? It's a very unusual name for Hashem. So the Medrash answers, he's the place of the world, and the world is not his place. And so then when he goes into this, he says that so push on a push it sense, what that means is that Hashem is greater than the world, so to speak. He is the place of the universe, and not just the universe, but all the universes. We know that according to the Arizal, the Ein Sof, the infinite Ein Sof, is surrounding everything from all sides. It made this little empty space in the middle, and all the elements are built up inside that space, right? So in essence, Hashem is surrounding us. The way that the Zohar phrases it, right, is Soivev Almin, Mamala Almin, Soivev Almin. He fills all the worlds, and he surrounds all the worlds in a different sense, because in the filling of the worlds, basically it's a filtration of the aura that's coming in, so that it doesn't overwhelm the world. So that it filtrates through it filters through the different partzifim and the different oilamis, right? That the aura should be reduced, so that ultimately at the end we can have a world where we exist, and we don't even see Hashem clearly in the world, even though He's everything and everywhere, right? But it's concealed because the light has been filtered down so much, right? So He's the place of the universe, and the universe is not His place. Then he says, if that is the whole point, right, then it doesn't really make sense why Chazal would need to give this name Hamukaim to clarify this point that the world is not His place, because he said obviously the world is not His place, because there's psikim that say that, because there's a pasuk that says Hashemayim v'shmai Shemayim lo yikal kalihi, that the heavens and the heavens of the heavens can't hold Him, right, and similar other statements. So it's obvious that Hashem can't be held within the physical world. So what does this idea of Mukam mean on a deeper level? And so basically he says, he connects the idea of Mukam to the idea that Hashem sort of created this empty space. He created this symptom to create for all the worlds to exist there, and that was His roots, and that was His will, that this should happen, because He had a will that there should be a Klal Yisrael, there should be an other to experience Him. And that was His will. We can't say He needed it, right? Because if we say He needed it, it's a problem. So it's philosophically, theologically a problem to say that the Ein Sof needed anything, right? Sometimes we do speak in that kind of language, and the reason why I speak in that kind of language, that that the Ein Sof felt incomplete without something to experience it, right? Or the way that the Leshem has this whole idea that being infinite and being everything, the one thing that he was lacking, that he was not, was finite, right? So then he wasn't fully complete because he was lacking the thing that's the paradox, that's the opposite, that's the antithesis to his own nature. So therefore, that's why he made the creation, to finally be complete by being able to be the antithesis of what he is. Okay, so that's elation. So that's deep, right? But basically, the idea is, so he explains the idea of this mukam implies this idea of the creation of the world, and the whole idea of the plan for the Klal Yisrael to be in this world, and for us to be here, and for us to be serving Hashem here in this world. And he quotes a second medrash, a different medrash, where the medrash has this whole idea, interestingly enough, that that perhaps Klal Yisrael are the mukam, right? So then if the whole idea of the mukam represents the idea of Hashem's idea of the creation, of creating the world, and it represents His roots and His will. So then when this medrash says that perhaps Klal Yisrael is the mukam, the Knesset Yisrael is the mukam, then that would imply that really the whole creation is for our sake, and we're so super important in what we do. But the medrash says, but no, it's not true. Klal Yisrael is not the mukam, Hashem is the mukam. Over there, doesn't use the word mukam, it's the word ma'oin, which means like habitation. It's the same idea, right? But basically what he ends off is that the Medrash tells us that you shouldn't think that, because be'emes, even though we have a tremendous avoida, and that avoida is to be misak and everything, and we're tremendously important, but at the same time, it's really all arbitrary, because Hashem just decided it should be this way. Okay, and yes, we can add on these philosophical statements that from the Leshem and so on and so forth, that yes, Hashem wanted it to be this way, but really this is what fulfills his desire. And the truth is, it doesn't really even matter if it's arbitrary, because if Hashem decided this is the way it should be, then this is his plan, and it's important. But anyway, the way that all of this wraps up and ties together, I'm skipping different things. He brought different types of medrashim also. He brought a different medrash of example that you have someone riding on a horse and his cloak that he's wearing is going down and covering over the horse. So then it's asked, what's the essence? What's the ikr? What's the most important thing? Is it the horse or is it the rider? Obviously it's the rider, right? So then the medrash says in that same way, the horse is like the world, the universe, or all the universes, and Hashem is like the rider that's sort of riding over it, right? Even though the horse is getting the rider to where he needs to go, and the horse is so important, right? Because the rider is not going to get to where he's going without the horse, assuming he's going somewhere far away, right? But at the same time, you would never say that the horse is the ikr and the horse is the main thing. Obviously, the rider is the main thing. So in that sort of a sense, we have to sort of balance these two ideas. At the same time, we're extremely, extremely important, right, in the system, and the system needs us. And there's a tikkun that needs to be made, and only we can do it. The maluchim can't do it. No one else can do it. It's only us that can make that tikkun. But at the same time, we have to remember, but the whole reason why it was set up this way is because Hashem knew that this is what would keep us fulfilled, right? And give us purpose. So it's really for us. It's not for him. It's for us, ultimately. Even there's two ways of looking at it. But and yes, and it's true, like someone chatted, so the finite is the face of Hashem in this world, right? Hashem in this world manifests as finite. This world is the finiteness of Hashem. The truth is that, as we mentioned before by the Shirim, yet that there is an infinity in that finiteness, right? Because you have, even mathematically speaking, you take a pizza, you cut it into thirds, right? So yeah, every single piece is 0.33333 repeating forever of that pizza. One third, that's what it is, 0.33333 repeating forever and ever and ever, right? What does that mean? That means there's an infinity in that finite, right? And the idea of going down, looking at the molecular level, then submolecular, some people wonder what's going to be the smallest unit of matter. Well, guess what? It's obvious. There will never be a smallest unit of matter, because by definition, the whole idea doesn't make sense, because anything can be broken down further, because you can just keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. So actually, inside any finite object that we have in our world, including ourselves, including the entire world, there's infinity in the finite. And that's how we see, even in the scientific sort of a way, a mathematical way, how we see that the infinity is in the finite, and Hashem is right here, and that Ein Sof is here. It's just making an illusion of being finite, right? So basically, ultimately, just to summarize, right? So we have the whole picture, right? Is that he tells us that Yaakov saw the Goliath and that's what he saw. He was afraid, right? He was afraid because he saw the third Goliath would be so long. But then he realized that the reason why the third Goliath is going to be so long is because there's going to be a tremendous Gila that comes after that Goliath. And how is that Gila going to come about? It's going to come about through Kal Yisrael doing the Avodas Hashem. That's the idea of the Maluchim going up and down. Which the Maluchim going up and down are being fueled by the Kal Yisrael. But then Yaakov said that but then this place where Yaakov was a Mukhaim. Was Mukam to remind us of the idea that Hashem is the Mekaimoy of the Olam, which means that Hashem created this whole system for us, right? So we shouldn't get super excited. We can get excited, it's good, but we shouldn't get too haughty and think, wow, everything's dependent on us. So we're like top of the world. You should remember, yeah, that's true, but Hashem only made it that way because He knew that that's what we need, right? So ultimately, it's not for Hashem's sake, it's for our sake, and it's an act of pure altruism and pure love from the Ein Sof, right? And so that's basically, in a nutshell, everything that Yaakov saw here in this adventure that he had at the beginning of this week's parsha. All right, everyone. Shkai for participating. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom. And see you all B'ezras Hashem next week.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom to all.
Shabbat shalom.